Okay, so for this articles club, we were supposed to read a paper by Alexandra Horowitz. So hopefully her name sounds super familiar to you guys. We talk about her previous papers a lot and also best-selling author. So this is a paper that she had submitted to the International Journal of Comparative Psychology in 2020. So yeah, just about last year. It's called The Discrimination of Person Odor by Owned Domestic Dogs. And like any science journal article title, this sounds really complicated, but all that means is can pet dogs smell their owners and kind of like understand that it is indeed that their owners. So just a show. Well, since Elaine's the only one here, hi Elaine. Did you get a chance to read through the article?
Okay, well, when I clicked on it, I couldn't download it. I got an error message, so no.
Oh,
I don't know why, but I wanted
that's
to read
weird.
it.
It might have been, I think because the way of probably because the journal, and now that I'm looking at the journal has it like embedded, and I think I might have put in the embed link instead of the
Oh,
journals. Yeah, yeah. But it's okay. We can go. Let me see if this works. I'm just gonna send
Yeah,
it
it's
over to.
expired for me as well, Laisuna. I was able to Google it, I think, when you had first told me you wanted to go over it. And Steph and Wendy are just joining as well.
Okay.
But let me see if this link works.
Yeah,
Okay, yeah, this one does work.
So I just dropped the link in the chat. Feel free to click it, and since you guys didn't get a chance to read it, we'll just go over it together, piece by piece. So go ahead, let me know if it works, and then we'll just kind of go through it together. Oh, and then also if you guys have the worksheet that kind of just guides you through the process of reading a paper, feel free to open that as well. But if not, I'm basically going to follow that guideline. Does everyone have it? Did the link work? It's good. Good. Oh, it works. Yes. Okay. Perfect. Hi, Steph. Hi, Wendy. That's such a cute picture. So we're just opening.
Oh, sorry. Just wanted to say hi.
Hi, yeah, I was like, oh wait, I should give her a second to settle in. So yeah, I just dropped the link to the paper in the chat in case you didn't get a chance to read it because apparently the link broke. So my apologies for that. But we're gonna just go through it together right here, right now, so we can all get on the same page. Okay. So the first thing when I'm reading the paper is basically the most important thing is what is the goal of this paper? So what is the aim? So usually that should be made pretty clear within either the first paragraph or the first section. So this one is an online journal. Yeah.
Could you actually share it with us on the screen so that everyone can kind of read along? I think that would be
good
easier
idea
for us to follow.
Yeah. Okay. Second, opening this up. Cool. Everyone's just blocking myself now for some reason. So this journal, so every journal basically has like a different format. So don't stress that too much. This is, I believe, an online journal. So what you usually see is like an abstract section, a method section, a results section, and then discussion section, so on and so forth. For this journal, it doesn't really have those subtitles, but they do generally still follow that same format. So as you are reading this, you can still kind of, for the most part, follow that guideline. So here we have the abstract. It's in the tiny, tiny letters, and it's usually in the very first paragraph you see. And this is a full summary of the paper and of what they did, the gist of what they did, and then their final conclusions. And usually when I'm reading papers, I'll always read the abstract first to see if they are addressing something that I'm interested in. So, how should we do this? Do you guys want
We could
to
take a moment to
continue on
read it.
that? Yeah.
Why don't we all just take like a moment to read the abstract? And
Yeah.
then once we're done, we can just drop it in the chat and say we're done.
Mhm.
Great.
So that's just this first part all the way up to keywords. So super short. Windy speed reader. Mhm. So definitely, okay. So it looks like we're all good. So now you have the question. So the question is, can you tell us what conspecifics are? Yes. So conspecifics is a fancy word of saying the same species. So if they're saying, where is it in sentence? Blah blah blah. There is evidence that is integral to recognition of conspecifics. So they are referring to the dog. So conspecific would literally just mean other dogs. So if they're talking about humans and they're like human conspecific, it's basically other humans. So yeah, I know it's the language of these papers are so annoying, and that's literally all that means. Others of the same species. Cool. So from reading the abstract, how many of you are kind of one, get the idea of what the paper about, and two, is interested and would kind of continue reading? You can say no. This would just help us get a good idea of what papers and what topics you're interested in, but also for you to say no. It's like, I don't want to read this paper. It's not of interest to me, which is kind of hard sometimes because you're just like, maybe I want to read it later. It's like, no, you can just say no and move on. So yeah, so did you get the idea of what this paper is about from the abstract? And two, would you like to continue reading it? Or would you, if it wasn't for this article club, of course?
Definitely yes to both.
Cool.
Yeah. 'Cause-
Helene,
because-
did you get the idea of this paper from the abstract, and are you interested in continuing? Not a
Yeah,
trick
like
question, yeah.
the idea is pretty clear. Yes, the idea is pretty clear, and I'm interested to see, mainly because when I observe, like even my own interactions with my dogs, they like when I see them sniffing me, it makes me wonder if they can actually recognize me. So I'm also curious about the word represent humans. Like, what does that mean exactly? Because I know recognize is like they identify that this is my human, but like, what does represent also mean as well in this
Right, because
context?
one of the big things is dogs are olfactory, whereas we're visual. So for us, like it's easy for us to understand like how we represent someone. It's usually by like, oh, like they look this way, they have like black hair, they have like glasses,
Yeah.
and that's how we visually represent something. But to know how an animal who kind of primarily uses scent represents something in their head, so almost like what kind of like image. I know using image and image is like visual, but like what kind of like set image kind of like appears in the head, which is a little abstract but kind of interesting. Cool. Um, cool. And then any more comments? Helene, do you have any like yeah, like would you like to continue reading about this, or like what about it is interesting? I guess is the question. It's a better question. Oh, wait, yes and yes. Okay. Ooh. Cool. So, no worries, Steph. We're just going to, so the rest of it is basically introduction and background. Most of the times I just kind of glance through this, mostly because it's just has to set it up. But I can actually summarize this real quick because I think most of the stuff is going to be familiar to us anyway, because we do read a lot of the stuff, or we do share a lot of this stuff and pet minded. And I think Steph kind of mentioned a lot of this stuff as well. So whereas we're very visual, dogs are very scent based. So the way that they kind of see and represent things inside their head should be a little different from the way we would represent something in a head. So for example, like an apple, if you say apple, then we will literally see a red fruit. Whereas you say apple and a dog might conjure up these these like memories of like scent of an apple, or like maybe like an orchid, or like I don't know, like a rainy day or something, depending on like whatever makes up the scent of an apple for them. So they're just really a lot of the studies in this part are previous studies. So if you are interested, this is a really good place to kind of look at where the authors of this paper, or author of this paper, kind of got the idea for this current paper. But also a lot more background information. But also don't feel like you have to, because it can get you into a really rabbit hole. So basically, why they are doing this is because previously dogs have been shown that they can indeed recognize humans, that they can recognize human voices, so basically that match human voices to like their actual person. And of course, we know scent detection dogs are really good at matching scents for drugs and then finding the drugs on the field. So that's also kind of what they call like a sample match. So you basically smell a scent and then you can kind of like find something else that smells like that. And usually it's the same thing, right? Because the same apple should have the same scent, or all apples should have like a relatively similar scent for the most part, versus like an orange or something. So yeah, there's a lot of evidence of dogs being able to tell things apart using scent and voices and sounds. Cool. So that's more background. Skim it. Let me know if you have any questions. But other than that, the background is pretty much like a bunch of information that leads up to what we are actually interested in, which is the goal of the study. So basically the background's building up all this information, and then we finally get to the point where we're just like, okay, what does that mean to us? So that's usually in the very, very last paragraph. So this is where we want to find the goals of the study. So this can be tricky, right? Because you think the title like says it all, but I always like to kind of find the exact sentence where it's explicitly stated what the goals of the study is. So why don't we go ahead and take a moment to read this very last paragraph, and then when you're done, tell me what it is. So what is the goal of the study, or the aim, or the question that they are asking? You can copy and paste it, because when it comes down to interpreting the results, this is where you have to kind of go back to, and it's a lot trickier than people think, and I'll explain why. But yeah, it's really important to identify the actual aim of the paper, and you can get really specific, because good hypotheses tend to be kind of specific in a way, yet open-ended. It's a balance of both. You can also, another way to help kind of get to like the aim of the paper is you could also just kind of like, I always like highlight keywords, like yeah, keywords that are really important to what it is that they're doing. hmm So that's, yep. So Sonali is right. So, and one of the aims is whether a dog can detect the human scent, whether or not the human is physically present or not. And so we kind of see that in the last sentence. I can give one more second for anyone to, if anyone else wants to kind of phrase their aims, goals, or questions in whatever way kind of makes sense to you. Okay, so I think like, so when I'm reading this, the other really important part, I think, of their aim is untrained dogs. So they want to know not only if dogs, ooh, cool, to extend the knowledge. Oh, so Steph says to extend the knowledge or research about human recognition. Oh, sorry, dog recognition of humans by order by including data for untrained dogs. So yeah, so that's the other thing about research, right? So you don't always, when you're reading these papers, it can be frustrating because you're reading it because you're like, I want concrete answers. But a lot of the times, papers are really just kind of extending the knowledge. So we're kind of, a lot of people, I always hear people say like, move the needle. So they're really just trying to move the needle into the direction that they think would be the most beneficial in order to like learn more. So sometimes you won't really get an answer, but you will hopefully know just a little bit more in the direction that the author believes would be the most important or like make the most difference in your lives with your dogs. So I think that's really important to know as well. So that was to extend knowledge. And yes, Steph got the other keyword that I was looking for, untrained dogs. So untrained dogs, one of the unique things about this study, or so they claim, is that they're using untrained dogs, right? So in other words, I think they use the word spontaneous in this paper, and that's the same. That's almost like, I guess, like instinctual. So dogs who don't really have never really been exposed or been asked to do this kind of order discrimination task, if they can just do it, and that's important, right? Because we know dogs can be trained to do almost anything, and when you train a dog to be able to do something like match a scent to their owner, then we kind of go into the realm of questioning, okay, is it associative learning? Because we know dogs are great at that. And so if it's associative learning, then it's kind of hard to tease that apart from like, okay, but does my dog really know me? Because, or are they just simply matching the scent that they are taught to me? So like when it's almost like clicker training, right? So when they hear a click, they get a treat. So like when they smell the scent, they come to me, and then they get a treat. So same idea. And so untrained here is a really important part of their study. And so I want to keep that in mind because the question I'm going to pose to you at the end of this is, are these dogs indeed untrained within the context of this experiment? So the dogs are going to do the experiment, and I want you to keep in mind, like, are these dogs truly untrained? And is this, or in other words, is this truly like a spontaneous response from them when they're doing the experiment? So with that, let's get into the experiment. I can summarize this as well, but this is really cool. I also really like these studies because, well, any dog studies, because they're all community science studies, meaning if you live near or have access to any of these dog cognition centers, you guys are the dogs that they're testing. So sign up for these. They're fun. I think they're a good experience for you and your dog if this is something your dog enjoys doing. So specifically, this one happened at Barnard. This one is in New York. They recruited all these subjects, specifically 38 dogs. I usually skip the demographics for studies like this because they're just not like it's also opportunistic, so it's kind of like whoever comes in. So I'm usually not too harsh with their subject, their population. Just because it's hard. Like you think it's not that hard, but sometimes it's a little hard to get dogs. So however much you can get is impressive. So subjects were 38 domestic dogs. Male to female ratio is pretty decent, right? 17 to 21. I usually find I get a lot of females, but that's just a side note. Anything else? You guys can just glance through this. I'm also kind of glancing through anything, and let me know if anything kind of strikes you as interesting or just like, huh, I want to know more about that. Other than that, okay, yeah, that's it.
I wonder if like when they bring their dogs into the lab, did they have any difficulties getting them to cooperate? Because I'd imagine that it's going to be very exciting to be in like this lab. And yeah, just I don't know. It's just something that came into mind. Like, were they able to get all their data despite the environmental stimuli around them?
Yeah. That's also really that's a good question. So at least with my experience, we always let the dogs acclimate first. So that's just them getting
Okay.
used to getting used to the space, getting used to everyone, depending. So usually for some studies, if someone has to be like a stranger, then they will like literally never interact with the dog, and it sucks for them, but it's part of the study. And it's usually the experimenter. It's experimenter or one of
Okay.
their like assistants. But for the most part, we try to make their introduction to the space as normal as possible, as pleasant as possible. But I will say when it gets to the experiment part, they usually kind of go into a room that's like relatively sterile, and that's the same in this case as well. So they basically are in a windowless room. I
Mhm.
actually think if I remember, I think their lab is in the basement, but they're in a windowless room. Um, and yeah, and that can be, at least for my dog, it was kind of like weird for him. And I think like for some dogs that is also a little weird, because it's like you're going from like a pretty normal environment, and then you go into a room where it's just like one, kind of sterile, and then two, all of a sudden like everyone's semi ignoring you, depending on the study. So I do think that transition is a little odd, but I mean, I don't know. I mean, the dogs get over it depending on the dog's personality. They do get over it because there's like, ooh, treats. Because then also like in 5 seconds we start just giving them like a bunch of treats. And when they start kind of doing stuff, we start praising them and all that. So I think the transition has like 5 seconds of like, whoa, what's going on? But then they get over it really quick. So once they get over it, you can start collecting your data, and it usually works out. Usually works out. We
Yeah,
also,
I just
yeah. So if you're interested in kind of signing up your dogs to these in-person community science dog situations, I do recommend it. I think it's fun, and that's the gist of what to expect when you kind of go to one of these.
right. I don't think we'd have access to any of those.
You can.
But
There's also
yeah.
online ones.
Yeah, online ones. I think that's the best Wendy and I can do in terms of like participating.
Yeah, Helene and
Ah, nice.
Zoe. Sorry, Zoe signed up. Did you guys sign up for ones in New York? Ah, online ones. Got it. Cool. So, cool. So we did talk a little about the testing room. Let's talk about the stimuli. So I guess the question is that you guys have is, okay, how did they get the sense, right? So the way they got the owner sense is literally by having them wear a t-shirt. So they wear this t-shirt, I think it was before they showered. So they wear this t-shirt
Mhm.
through, hold on, I have to review this because they do it different sometimes. But yeah, the room is basically plain room with no kind of visual landmarks to kind of help the dog remember stuff,
Mhm.
because dogs can do that too. They're really smart. Here you are. So this is their odor source. So give me 1 second. Yeah, so they wore the shirts after they refrained from bathing right before putting on the shirt. Yeah, so no bathing before they put on the shirts. So usually they will do it at night. So that sounds like this, but like after like a couple hours after they shower. Uh, I guess it depends. But yeah, they asked owners to refrain
Mhm.
from bathing right before they put on the shirt. So, I mean, basically, it's just so they don't wash away any scent, or at least
Yeah.
cover it with soap and water, is the idea. And of course, no fragrances. Other than that, they should have the scent on the t-shirt. So, what do we think about that? What do we think about that method of kind of getting odor onto, like, I guess getting like an odor sample? How smelly? I guess like my question is, how smelly are the clothes after a
Yeah,
long day,
I'm
right?
wondering too, like would it be stronger if they use like underwear?
Right?
Would-
I feel like
this
people
is
will be a
so
little reluctant, but yeah, no, I feel like that's true, because dogs are always, because that's like, that makes sense, right? Because dogs aren't really sniffing like our bodies. I mean, they are, but
yeah.
they kind of go straight for the crotch. So,
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's
and
not
that's
like a
what
gross
dogs do.
thing. Like
Hmm.
it's not a gross thing, but I'm thinking like it's strong. Maybe we're
It's
stronger
where they
if it's
go.
sent there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if they're looking, I think if they're looking for kind of like a more like natural kind of scent, or like a
Hmm.
natural way dogs pick up scent, I think that makes sense as well. because
Yeah, like
that's where they go.
well, I mean, I guess thinking maybe if in terms of a shirt, then it's like the underarm. That's where body odor is as well. And
Yeah.
then just and I'm curious to know if like the skin, yeah, it goes emits maybe a lighter odor or something compared to those other body parts. Yeah.
Yeah, Helene said Zoe actually goes straight for her shoes. I think she thinks it's because she's walking dogs outside all day. That would make sense as well, right? But I think the thing with the shoes, because you're walking around all day, there's a lot of like novel scents, right? So she
Mhm.
might not be, I feel like she might not be picking on like the owner's scent because she knows it's you, right? If you come through a door, like it's very clearly you. So then her interest might be like, where did you go, mom? Like, where have you been? And I think the shoes are a really good source of odors for to find that out for that. But yeah, I think with the shirts, I think the one thing I was thinking of, there was I think I don't know if we had shared it, but there was like a study where they wanted to see whether dogs could detect stress in humans, and they had like yeah, I think they had like vet professionals and then the owners, and they basically put like cotton pads under their armpits and they collected like pit sweat for the dogs. And yeah, they found that, you know, that dogs seem to be able to kind of detect stress from that. So I wonder like if I also kind of wonder if like the body emits like different types of scents like stress pheromones, or like especially like if you're kind of wearing the shirt at work and it was like a stressful day at work. And I wonder if that is different. But it might not be important to the study. So moving on. So yeah, so that is how they collected owner shirts, and similarly for stranger odor, they did the same, but with obviously someone the dog didn't know, and that's really easy because it could just be them. And of course they steal the scent to kind of preserve it. They do their best. So let's look at the experimental design real quick. So this is the setup of what they did. So we can see here. I don't know if you can see my mouse, but you have the owner sitting with the dog here. You have cameras and everything, so that's super important. And then right here in the middle, about 2.26 meters away, is where they would kind of put the set down. And yeah, as I was saying, this during the experiment, it can be kind of weird for the dog because a lot of the time experimenters avoid interacting with the subject. So we don't want to kind of mess with the results in that way, intentional or not. So they tend not to interact. They don't engage. They don't touch the dog. They don't call the dog's name. We usually let the owners deal with that just to kind of keep it more natural. Oh, sorry. So let me know if I'm scrolling too fast. Yeah. Okay. So all this is saying is that no one is, they're just trying to reduce the amount of cues that they're giving the dog. So they don't want to look at the dog. They don't want to kind of like or unconsciously direct the dog to make any single choice. And then let's move on to the procedure. So this is what they did. I have to I should have there's some notes on this because I didn't like the way they wrote this. Okay, so I'm gonna try to. Do you guys want me? Do you guys want to read it for a quick second, or if you give me a second, I can kind of speed run you through this because the way they actually like read it, like the way they wrote it, it's kind of like out of order, at least to me. But I will give you guys a second. Yeah, the stress study stuff. Do you want to copy the stress one?
Yeah, I'd love to read that
Yeah,
one.
yeah, yeah. Let me find it. It should actually just be in my Zotero. Yeah, I will make a note of it. But yeah,
Yeah,
I'll
thanks,
give you guys
thanks.
a second to read the procedure. Pull up to block the procedure, but that's it. Since you guys are all speed readers, I'm gonna scroll past that first paragraph. That's it. And let me know when you guys are done. And also ask questions here about the procedure because that's how you know whether or not the original aims of the study was answered. Because sometimes you can have a really well designed experiment, but it literally does not answer the question that they were trying to for various reasons.
So the stimulus box is just to get the dog to come and investigate the object. Not so much. It hasn't like the experiment hasn't really started yet. Like there's no t-shirts involved. It's just to get the
Mhm.
dog to like
Yeah, so
investigate.
there's yeah, they wrote it a little so they wrote it a little weird. So there's three conditions. They have the orientation box, and that's no t-shirt. That's just a treat. They have the owner odor, so that's the t-shirt from the owner, and the stranger odor, which is the t-shirt from one of the experimenters likely. And so what they do for the orientation box is the one with the cookie in it and no t-shirts. So a lot of the times, dogs need to be you need to make sure that dogs will approach the box, right? Because if you kind of just present them with either the owner or stranger odor, but like a test odor, right? They're not really going to be interested, or like they are, but then they'll kind of lose interest really fast. So we always kind of have like a first kind of phase, which basically kind of conditions the dog to at least like explore and approach the box. And a lot of times, it's a treat because dogs smell a treat and they're just like, ooh, they're approaching it. So that's kind of all that is. We want to make sure that dogs will approach the box. And then once we kind of, and then once they do that, then you can basically start the test conditions. But so it's orientation, which is the third box, which was presented first. And then they alternate presenting oh no, they don't. They present the owner or owner odor and then the stranger odor. Oh my gosh. And yeah, so during the orientation, you can kind of really encourage the dog because what you want them to succeed. So during the conditioning, you really want the dog to approach and have happy associations with at least approaching the box. And that's fine because that's also kind of like how you test if a dog is comfortable. Because if they're really uncomfortable in the room and they really don't want to proceed with the experiment, at this point we can always stop and be like either if the owner wants to try again at another point. But yeah, so that's also kind of like another reason why we do these orientation box or these kind of like conditioning phases. So we always want to make sure your dog is happy. So yeah, so this is the fun part, the orientation, where you just like really encourage them to approach and they get lots of treats for literally just participating. And then this is the interesting part. So this is the test condition, right? The stimulus box. So this is either the owner or the stranger. They treat it the same as the orientation trial. So that's the cookie trial. And they see what happens. So for this part, they present the boxes 4 times. So P1, P2, and PF is for the owner odor. So that means they put the owner odor in the room and then the dog approaches it at least 3 times, or they can't approach it for 3 trials. And then the last one is the stranger odor. And so the reason why they're doing this is because they're using what is basically a habituation paradigm. And so that's where, so habituation really quickly is when you get used to a certain stimulus. So because you're used to it, you just basically stop responding to it, either because it becomes like familiar and like kind of irrelevant, or just because it's no longer interesting. So it's not like a dangerous thing. It's just like, oh, I know what that is, so I don't really care anymore. Is basically what habituation is. So what they're trying to do is in the first 3 trials, they're presenting the owner odor. So as the dog approaches this odor, so let's assume the dog approaches the odor all 3 times. As they're approaching each odor, what would happen is if the dog is habituating, then they would approach the odor. It would take longer for them to approach the odor because they're not interested anymore. They're like, I know what that is. I know that's my human. I don't care. And then by the 4th time, you switch it up. So you're switching up the odor to a new odor. And ideally, if your dog, and usually what happens is you dishabituate. So when you present the new odor, if the dog dishabituates to the odor, then they would approach it quicker because once again, it's something new and it's something interesting, or it's something different and they're just like, ooh, what is going on? But either way, what happens is you expect that fourth trial to be a quicker approach to the box because of all those reasons and and more. And so that is what they're looking for. So if that was the whole, that would be like an ideal kind of habituation trial. You present the same type of stimulus over and over again, and then once the subject, or this dog in this case, becomes dishabituated, becomes habituated, sorry, you present the new thing and you see what happens. So just like for reference, not everyone habituates, not everyone dishabituates. We will just have to see. But ideally that's what happens. Oh, cool. And they actually did it if the dog habituates after 2, that they just skip the 3rd, which is totally fine because you can. If that happens, then there's really no point in giving the 3rd. So let's look at how they actually define habituation, right? So here it says dogs were said to have reached habituation when their investigation time decreased by 50% or more from their initial. And that's and they got it from this study, Cohen 2004. Did I look at that? No, I looked at the other one. So what do we think about that? So for example, yeah, so what do we think about that? So for example, if your dog had sniffed around the box for about 30 seconds, then in order for them to count that your dog had habituated to your scent, your dog would have to sniff the box for only about 15 seconds. Thoughts? It's okay. You don't have to. We can move on.
No, I'm actually curious about. Oh, wait, sorry. Can you repeat your
Okay.
question again?
Yeah. So I guess like, what did you think about their definition of habituation? And then the example was if your dog had explored your odor for about 30 seconds in order for them to kind of move on to the next odor and for the experiment to be like, yes, this dog is habituated, they would have to sniff for at least for 15 seconds or less in either their second or third.
There has to be like at least 2 trials for them to
Yeah. So they
make
have to at least
sure.
2 trials. Yeah, you can't
Okay.
you can't count. Yeah, you can't count habituation after 1 trial because it's like
Yeah.
baseline. Yeah, your first trial is
Right,
basically
right.
baseline, and then yeah, they basically get 2 chances to habituate ultimately.
Okay. Yeah, I guess that makes sense because um, I would imagine that it might be a little confusing, or maybe I don't know how to describe it. Like, if there was only 1 chance to identify the human odor, and then you give them something new, like
Yeah.
how can they actually tell, right? If this is like,
Yeah.
yeah.
No,
So
the first one's always baseline. Yeah.
yeah. So I'm wondering, would I did the researchers did not want to risk the dog habituating to the stranger odor? Is that why they only showed it once compared to the to the human odor, the owner odor? They gave it like 2 to 3 times, 2 to 3 trials.
Yeah.
Yeah, is
Yeah.
that what they were going for?
So I don't know, because I thought that was kind of interesting as well. I'm assuming it might have been a logistic thing. I mean, it's fine because it's like a really, really basic like kind of habituation paradigm. Because they literally only do 4 trials, right? So 3
Mhm.
owners and then the dishabituation, which is the stranger. But it's fine because the idea is that in order to like dishabituation isn't gradual. So dishabituation happens like if it happens when something changes. So I
Okay.
think like another way to kind of think about it is like for us, right? So I don't know if you guys like live in the city, but if you live in the city, there's constantly noises and traffic outside your door, right?
Yeah.
So after a while, you become habituated to it. Like it just
Mhm.
doesn't bother you anymore. You don't even notice it. But if there was like a car crash outside, it's still traffic noise, right? But you become dishabituated because you're just like, oh, it's like that's something new, that's something different. So it's
Yeah.
a similar idea to that, right? So your owner odor is like the constant traffic. You're like, oh, okay, like this is new, I don't care. And then that stranger odor is almost like the car crash. You're just like, oh my gosh, what is that? And so yeah, if this situation happens, that's usually how it happens. So it's not necessarily gradual because if you think about it from like an evolutionary standpoint, if if you don't respond quickly to these like sudden changes in the environment, like if that was like a gradual change, chances are you're not reacting fast enough to survive, right?
That's
So
true. That's true. That makes
yeah,
sense.
so that's why it's fine. So yeah, for this it's really basic, but it's totally fine. That's the idea for it, and yeah, for the most part,
Mm,
like yeah, I think yeah. I don't know if he's doing anything more with this, but yeah, so good question, and that's yeah, so that's why that's okay. But I thought
interesting.
that was it could definitely go more in depth, but I guess that's not her goal. Cool. So before we move on, any more questions about the procedure before we kind of get into like the nitty gritty of it? Because I definitely want you guys to kind of understand what they did with the dogs and you know how they're because that's eventually going to lead to like why they made their conclusions they made. And once again, back to whether or not they achieved their aims. Always go back to the aims. Don't let them get away with not answering the questions they said they're going to answer.
So I guess my last question is, what were they looking for? Or maybe it wasn't here, or maybe I missed it. What were they looking for in terms of when they introduced the stranger odor? Were they looking for the dog to be interested again in the
Mm-hmm.
scent? Because for the owner odor, they were waiting for the dog to habituate to it. When they introduced the stranger odor, what were they looking for? It was like to spend more
So
time sniffing, or uh, I'm not sure if like how
yeah,
what were they doing in the experiment to say that, oh, the dog identifies or recognizes the owner odor, even like, I don't know, did that make sense? Like, what were they
yeah,
looking for?
yeah.
Did they want the dog to
Yes.
go immediately to the owner odor after sniffing the stranger odor? Because I
Yep.
saw that we were going into the results, so maybe that was already being addressed there.
Nope. So good catch. They never actually defined this situation, at least like explicitly, right? So usually because they didn't do that, my assumption is that they're just looking at the time. So they're just measuring the time the dog takes to actually investigate the stranger odor. So I don't think it doesn't look like they have a criteria for it. And it looks like it's because they're just seeing how long the dog actually investigates the stranger odor. And I guess they're going to do that in the analysis. So let's move. That's a great transition. But yeah, keep that in mind. They don't seem to have a criteria for this situation. They didn't really explicitly state it, so we're probably just going to see what they collected in terms of how long did the dog actually investigate the stranger odor. And so usually what you can kind of assume is that if the dog dishabituate, then yeah, you're looking for a longer investigation time during the stranger odor. How long? We'll find out. This is an adventure, guys. I'm really
Awesome.
enjoying this. So, data analysis is not too interesting. I can kind of walk you guys through this. It's just saying it was videotape. They have coders, coding behaviors, and these are somewhat third person coders who don't know what the purpose of the experiment are. So blind, always a good quality check. You always want blind coders. Triple blind, double blind. The higher the blindness, the better. So basically, the less the people know who are doing this stuff, the better, because you can just say like you really can say like they don't even know what's going on. They can't have a bias. And so that's what blind coders or blind trials are. Uh, Let me see. I'm just gonna read this real quick to make sure I don't miss anything important. Yeah, so they're just kind of getting into the specifics at all. So they are coding the time spent investigating the owner odor. Oh my gosh, I cannot say odor. If I'm saying order, I'm saying odor. So owner odor, at which habituation was achieved. So just kind of look at that a child by child basis. And so if you have two coders, you have one person saying, okay, the dog actually habituated at. So let's say the dog did all three habituation trials with the owner odor. Um, then you have two coders who are kind of just agreeing to that. So if one coder goes, oh, actually the dog habituated at 2, and then the second coder is, oh yeah, you're right, then they agree that it's 2, and then 3 is just like, it's fine. It's fine because it habituated at 2, and that'll just be that. Um And of course, they coated the boxes as well to make sure that the dogs are responding, are habituating to like the right boxes. So sometimes, I mean, I think this is just to be thorough, which is nice because sometimes if you are indeed looking for habituation and you kind of like mix up the trials, then you can kind of like subconsciously be like, oh yeah, that dog actually had like dishabituated, and it's like it's a owner trial, so that like makes no sense, and so you could be like, you're being subconsciously biased. Anyway, that's just like psych thingy. Usually it's not that bad. Everyone's like really conscious and really careful not to do that, but always good when looking at quality of studies that they're as thorough as possible to try to rule out any like human errors. And so that's just kind of what they're doing with that data analysis. Usually it's pretty solid. Okay, so let's look at who didn't make it, right? So just really quickly, because we started with 38 dogs, right? But like I said earlier, not all dogs are going to one get conditioned. So this is the box, but they're not even kind of smelling odors yet. They're just kind of learning to approach the box and learning that the box gives them yummy treats and lots of praise. So 3 dogs didn't do that, and that's totally fine. But because they didn't kind of approach the box, then there's no way they can habituate because they're just like, I don't care. In 4 cases, there was experimental errors. This happens, okay? Things happen in the lab that we can't like control for, like the camera falling. This has 100% happened to me as well. So now we've lost 3 dogs to no fault of their own. So just kind of I just always like to keep in mind the number of subjects in the study. So now we have 31 dogs, which is fine. So in the remaining 31 dogs, we have, oh my gosh, okay, we are coming to a conclusion. So I'm going to just go straight to the stats. We can whirlwind through this because I know this is really long. Hold on, where are we? So for the most part, why don't we just look at the charts? So these aren't great charts. They're literally, yeah, okay, I'm glad I see stuff nodding. I'm glad we can agree to this, but it's fine. They'll do what we do. I mean, they'll do what we need. So blue is the first, is the investigation time for the first. Orange is the habituated presentation for the owner order. So this is so what these bars are showing you is the time the dog investigated, right? So if in the blue is the first presentation of the owner, how long did the dog investigate? And so this ranged from about 2 seconds to 12, with the average around 6 seconds. So on average, dogs spend about 6 seconds spelling their owner odor. And then during the habituation trial, so this is a trial which dogs are just like, oh, that's my owner. Like I don't care. This is not interesting to me. So in those trials, they took about less than 2 seconds to explore the box. And then finally, in the stranger odor, we have a really wide range of times for investigation. So anything from 0 to, it looks like 14, with an average of 8 seconds. So I think the more important numbers here to remember, we can kind of take these averages, it's not too bad. The average time it takes for a dog to investigate their owner's odor was 6. The amount of time that the dog spent investigating their owner odor when they stopped caring, so when they habituated, was about 1 second. And then when they dishabituated and was smelling the stranger odor, they spent on average about 8 seconds. So, next to the one outlier. And that looks like it's a little lovely. Okay, so what does that tell us? I mean, we can go to this discussion, but this could be kind of like an in-between. So what does that tell us? What do we want to know? Or what do we think about those results? Do we think,
So I guess the dogs that participated are quite sensitive to the changes, because then we see that there's a larger
Right.
amount of time investigating the stranger odor.
It's kind of spread out too, right? Like you
Yeah.
kind of, I mean, it's a little like it's kind of leaning to the left, so like it's on the lower end. So this is just kind of the median. So this is like the median. So if you kind of like put all of them in order, this is kind of like the middle number. So it's a little, but I mean, it's pretty evenly distributed, so the average should be acceptable. But yeah, generally you can kind of,
Yeah, I think they are pretty they can distinguish based on this. They were able to.
Yeah, based on this, yeah, I would semi agree, just because they're so pretty close. But yeah, I definitely wouldn't stray away from that kind of conclusion. And so yeah, I think, and so Dr. Horowitz also kind of leans towards this as well, right? So they do think that dogs were able to represent their owners, at least use it by scent from this. Do using this kind of like habituation dishabitual paradigm. Um, just let me read this quickly. Feel free to read it as well and let me know if anything stands out or if you have any questions. So we are in the discussion, so we're basically wrapping the study up in the next 5 minutes, which I think is solid. We went through this very thoroughly, so I hope you're happy with it. But I think like when you're being discussion, one thing to think about is whether you think that they kind of answered their original question or original goal, achieved the original goal. I think this is interesting, right? So they said, although dogs discriminated their owner's scent from another person's scent, this is not evidence that they associated that scent with the odor. What do you guys think about kind of that?
So when you say match, is there like a clear indication that they are matching the scent with the owner? Like, for example, you show them the odor, you show them the object, they immediately like go to the person. Is that what you mean by matching? No.
So by matching, that's usually what they mean. So if they did a match to sample, that's what they would ask. They would let the dog sniff something like a t-shirt, and the dog would have to indicate to like what that scent belongs to. So in this case, the owner. So that would be matching, but they didn't really do that here.
Yeah, they did not. Is that why? So I think it says here, right? It's not evidence that they associated because they didn't like ask the dog to match.
Yeah. So there's no way you can, at least in the way they did it, you don't know if the dog habituating was because they recognized the owner scent as familiar. So what do you guys think is like one way they can kind of not like perfectly kind of prove it, but kind of perhaps, I don't know, like a little bit prove that, oh, well, it could be that. Like I guess like I don't know, what else would you guys like to have seen in like the study to kind of like address this issue of like whether the dog associate the scent with the owner, or I guess didn't like prove or disprove this. I feel like I always hate like unilateral things. So I guess what I'm getting to is I wonder if like the presentation, I think with the habituation was one short, but also I think like I wonder if what would happen if they presented like the stranger odor first. So they had like a set of dogs so that were presented with the stranger odor for the first three, and then with the owner odor for like the final dishabituation. Like I would put my money on you get the same results, honestly. So interesting.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I think
Cool.
I mean, going back to that we're working with untrained dogs, it would be interesting as well to see if they could match. I mean, without any experience, without any prior training, training to match things with
Do it
sense.
spontaneously, right?
Yeah, spontaneously. Can they find their owner? Having been presented with two different scents, and for example, the owner hides or is in a different place in the room, would they be able to find their owner based on the information that was given to them?
Yeah.
I don't know how skewed the research, the experiments or the research would be, but that's something I would be very interested in, and yeah, like so. I mean, this is probably like deviating away from this, but
You're good.
I'm like here at home, we play hide and seek games. And then I let my son hide with a treat, and I'm just like I'm very curious to know if Windy is able to find him based on his scent or based on like visually like seeing his direction of where he's going and things like that. So and she's not trained professionally as a scent dog, like with scent work. So
Windies are good like scent based dogs though. They used to hunt like rats, right?
yeah. Yeah,
That's
so
why the
like
queen kept them around.
right. So yeah, for the study, like I'd be interested to see like okay, so they're presented with these odors and they're able to habituate to the owner's scent. Would they still be able to identify that this is their owner if the owner themselves wasn't around in the
Yeah.
room, something like that?
Yeah. And also the owner was kind of in the room too, right? Like I don't
Yeah.
think yeah, so I thought that was weird. I was like, isn't this the owner? Like if we go back to the I was like, is this the owner? Because the
Yeah, I think
experimenter
so.
is yeah, the experimenter is standing here to like present the box and then they're looking at a mirror to make sure, to see their thing. So I thought it was weird.
Yeah, so like what if for example the owner and the dog were in the room, and then maybe I don't know how it would look like, but like the dog would go into another room, see the scent, and then find their way back or something. I don't know how that would look like, but it's just it would be
Yeah.
interesting. It would be
It's
interesting to
yeah,
see.
yeah, for sure.
Because like
I think that's
the owner being in the room sort of like maybe they're familiar, they're comfortable in the situation because they maybe they look
yeah,
back, they see their owner, they're okay, they're okay, wondering if they feel comfortable uh in that situation, whereas if the
yeah,
owner wasn't around and they had
yeah,
all they had was the odor information,
yeah.
how would they perform?
Yeah, I will say it is a tricky thing because sometimes like having the owner there is both like a blessing and a curse because having the owner there makes the dog comfortable because if the owner would leave, sometimes the dog like that's just like an extra level of weirdness aside from being in the room that the dog is almost like they don't want to participate because they're like where did my owner go? So yeah, it is kind of like a double-edged sword type of dealio having the
Yeah.
owner there because it's just like I want the dog to be comfortable, but also the owner can be some form of distraction. So yeah, but no, that's really interesting. So why don't we wrap up with final thoughts? If anyone have any final questions or final comments about whether this paper, what do you think about this paper? Whether it kind of like addressed the aims or at least what you wanted to know. So not necessarily the aims, but like what you were reading it for, kind of close to the aims. And what do you think of this? Do you want more of this? Oh, and I forgot to mention, I think the next article club we're doing a nutrition paper.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, it's not that bad. Because a lot of nutrition is just
Yeah.
like lipids and proteins and it's just it's okay. It's
Yeah,
fine. It's not important.
I think I probably like gave much of my thoughts about the experiment. What's really interesting and what I would love to see if anyone would extend the research on this, because I'm thinking like a stranger odor is new stimuli, and just considering everything like the environment, they're in a new place, there are other objects in there. Like, is there more that can be done to really see if the dog, I can like identify that this scent is my human, whereas this is like, oh, new, but like how can the dog distinguish
definitely more concrete evidence is needed. One other really good place to kind of continue reading or look for other sources that might answer these questions is in the references. So a lot of people skip over this section, but the references are literally a treasure trove of everything the researcher had read to give you kind of more information about almost well everything in the paper that they had talked about, but like the actual source of it. So I do encourage everyone to kind of take a look at the references. Just you can definitely just read through the titles, and if it's like, oh yeah, that looks like it. Great sources are here. And with that, let's wrap this up. So thank you guys all for coming. I hope you guys enjoyed this. I hope you guys learned lots and lots. And I hope to see you guys in the next one. And I'm going to make sure that that link works.
Awesome. Thank you, Lisa. No, it's fun. This is interesting.
Yeah, I hope this was fun for everyone. Cool. So, yeah.